All right, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in once again. We're going to do a little cube chat here. I am, as always, excited and honored to be joined by not just one, but two excellent guests from the cube community. First up, going in alphabetical order, because I cannot possibly rank these two people, is John Terrill from Cultic Cube. John, how are you today?
Hey, good. Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. And I'm also joined by the mastermind behind my favorite cube website on the internet, Cube Cobra, which is Gwen Dekker. Gwen, how are you doing as well?
Good. Thanks for having us.
It is absolutely my pleasure. So I do have a specific reason, as I mentioned to you two, but there is a specific reason that I asked you two specifically on, because this sort of conversation that I definitely want to have, among the other many things that I'm sure we'll get into, started when your cubes were on MTGO. So just in case anyone is completely out of the loop on it, both the Cultic Cube, which I'll drop some links in the chat momentarily, but the Cultic Cube, John's brainchild, and the Dekker Cube, Gwen's cube, were featured on MTGO a while ago. Not too far into the sort of quarantine, I think. So that was a little breath of fresh air in a very troubling time. Yeah, so this for me all started when those cubes went up, and like reading your articles and talking about archetypes, and like, you guys both were kind enough to come on my burgeoning YouTube channel, and you guys had your own content out and everything. So I spent a lot of time, obviously, thinking and talking about both of these cubes, which I'm going to link in the chat right now, just in case anyone wants to follow along. And looking at the way that these cubes were structured really got me thinking about not. It got me thinking about archetypes, right? But when we spend time talking about archetypes, I think we usually focus on what goes into them, right? Like, what's the best set of flyers for a white blue flyers deck, or what removal, how many counter spells do you need to support a certain type of control deck or a tempo deck or things like that. But what occurred to me, and I think I got to give a little extra credit to Gwen on this one, is there's sort of a few different ways you can even just think about oh yeah, Cultic. Excuse me, John. I think you're right. That is the. I might have had the old version or the wrong version of the cube there.
Yeah, I have a live one that I added, and then an
Okay,
archived
gotcha.
one
Gotcha.
that stores the state
Right, right,
that it was like at when I was on Moto.
right. I thought I got the archived one, but I may not have. That looks right. Um, well, now everyone has both. Um, so, Gwen, if you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot here, and we have the article if you want to refresh yourself. But walk me through kind of how you view the archetypes in your cube when you were designing this.
So I wanted to have a lot of archetypes where you don't need to have like a critical mass of cards. So something where you have cards, a lot of cards that are just fine on their own, a lot of cards that are just glue, but then have a couple payoff cards that kind of define the archetype. And I think some decks were pretty successful. Like if you take like Thassa's Oracle is a really good example.
Right.
Like it created the entire type of control deck where the only win condition was War of the Spark Jace and Thassa's Oracle,
Right.
and also next to Fate technically, but that one's a little different.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and and Aristocrats is also a good example. That was probably the most successful archetype. And all it really was is a bunch of black and red aggro cards, but then you have a couple cards that really synergize well with everything else going on, like Blood Artist and Hissing Ignitar. They just really like make the deck. And
Right.
I didn't like. I want to stay away from an type of archetype cube where it's really on rails, and because I think it makes an uninteresting draft, and you end up where you kind of just pick the only card that works in your strategy. But I also want
Right.
to not go completely what I think of as like good stuff. It's like everything can be played, in any deck of that color, Pretty much, you're just trying to pick the best card every time. It's
Right.
as you go through the draft, you're actually considering, well, this card I have to value differently because I have this interaction. And
Okay.
that's my general approach.
Okay, I like that. And then John, comparatively, where do you think you fall? I think Gwen kind of defined the spectrum there that I'm hinting at, which is there on one end there's on rails, right? And it's I think it's hard to find a good example of a whole cube that's designed that way, but I know there are tribal cubes out there, um, and um, the tribal aspect is going to put that whole cube, solidly on rails. And then we do have, obviously, like, I mean, geez, the cube that I designed recently, basically out of desperation, that I loosely call the quarantine cube, is basically just all the good cards that I already owned on MTGO, plus like $5 worth of infusion to kind of bring it a little bit more together. But 100%, it's a good stuff cube in many ways, and really you can just take the best card or the card that you like the most out of any given pack. But anyway, the original question for Cultic Cube, where on that spectrum do you think the design kind of fell, or where were you aiming for?
Yeah, for Cultic, my aim was to support what I call the macro archetypes of Magic, which are the major theaters of gameplay. So these are the classic, you know, Rochambeau theaters of gameplay, which are,
Right.
you know, aggro, mid-range, control, and combo is this sort of funny asterisk because combo is such a nebulous term.
Yep.
Can go in so many different directions. Um, I and I think sort of the cleanest way of playing. I think the cleanest thing to do would have been to have abandoned combo entirely and just had support for these different iterations of aggro, mid-range, and control, where there are parasitic archetypes in the sense that it goes in exactly one deck, basically.
Right.
So it's not as if there aren't cards that don't just go in one place, but the majority of cards go in one of these macro archetypes and don't price one into a particular narrow strategy, especially a particular narrow strategy that requires a discrete set of colors.
Okay.
And so here, this is another approach to doing just what Gwen was describing, I think, which is, Gwen was talking about his reticence to create an experience that's too on rails.
Right.
And I think he did an admirable job of this, of finding
Oh, yeah.
ways of, of finding archetypes that could cross-pollinate with one another, and you can end up with these really interesting mishmashes of different strategies. So this was another approach to doing that.
Okay. So I think it sounds to me like I think I would say both cubes fell fairly close to the middle of that spectrum. Again, they weren't, there was enough definition that when you look at a card, you have to evaluate it on more than just basically its elo. You can't just look at a card and say this is the best card or the fifth best card in the cube, and I opened it so I take it because there's nothing better. But similarly, you're not so on rails that you're just literally grabbing every merfolk or every elf or what have you from every pack and then mindless draft completely on rails.
Yeah, I think that's totally right, and I don't love on rails drafting.
Yeah.
I think that this is so, as you say, the tribal model is a fine example of this. I think too, what WotC's been doing for several years now, I mean maybe longer, whereby they define a discrete strategy that they want to push for every given guild effectively,
Right.
and then create these so-called signpost uncommons in each guild.
Right.
This is something that silos the drafter into a narrow strategy, and I think it treats the drafter like a novice. It's this kind of hand-holding effect, is
Yeah.
how I understand it. And this may be great for a cube that's designed for novices or for situations where you don't have a regular play group. All of that makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
But I think this also only works when the gold card is when this signpost uncommon gold card is a high enough power level
Yeah.
and a desirable enough payoff to turn the drafter's head and make them want to take this thing and go into this thing.
And
So
and
then
and
there's
it's
a
got to
whole
not
path-
land in pack 3, right?
Oh,
Like,
that's for sure.
that's something that
very
always
true.
bothers me about the idea of signpost cards. If there's too few of them, or if they're meant to be sort of like the stake in the ground, is like, these cubes are 540. There's a
Yeah.
lot of cards
Right.
on the bench every draft, and
Right.
I'd hate to get into something that I can't get all the way there, but I can't get out of either.
Yeah,
Right.
that's just a major problem of specific archetypes, like especially ones that need critical mass. If you're talking about like an archetype like opposition, like that sort of deck, if opposition's not on the draft, then you can't draft it. But
Doesn't
also,
exist.
like, you're not going to go into it unless you see it. So
Sure.
that kind of like just adding opposition is pretty safe because it's just like a one card archetype.
Right.
Whether it's in the draft or not, no one's going to get trapped into it and not see the opposition. Compared to something like Twin Combo, maybe somebody just picks up Kiki Jiki and Splinter Twin, but then the Seaver Exarch and Pestermite are just not in the draft and they're just not able to come together at all.
Right. And another archetype, whoops, I double clicked that occurred to me. Here we go. This is the archive version. And I thought I remembered you included these cards, but not. Yeah, so another archetype that occurred to me as a very density reliant archetype is the Wildfire deck. If you want to kind of get that like deck together, from my understanding, because I've never run it myself, but like you said, much like opposition, you definitely need to pick up one of these two cards, Burning and Wildfire, and then from there you got to pick up some rocks, right? A couple, in this case, signets, something that'll be left over after you land your key card. Now again, not super parasitic, because it's basically a two card archetype, right? If you're already running like signets and stuff, which why would you not?
Yeah, and the rocks are desirable on their own.
Right.
So
Right.
that's good. So
Yep.
then the Wildfire can be sort of gravy.
Yeah.
And you could well have been prioritizing picking up signets, which seems like a smart thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And then you see the Wildfire and you grab the Wildfire.
Yeah. I've frequently lost games in the Dekker Cube to people who are playing signets, and the correlation was not lost on me.
Yeah, so one of my approaches to the Wildfire archetype in this cube was I didn't just want to have red be, you can play an aggressive deck, you can play a mid-range deck, and then there's this Wildfire you could randomly do, because there's kind of like a huge disconnect in the color. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make red bigger than I guess most people are used to. So I included a lot of red control cards. So I also have like the 4 mana, deal 4 damage to each creature and Planeswalker. And then I also have more Planeswalkers in red. So you like the 6 Chandra,
Right.
and board wipe and make the tokens. And that one's, yeah, exactly. And that one's super good because it's not just making red. It's actually, I can build like a red control deck, I can build a red aggro deck.
Right.
And it's not just Wildfire. There's actually other pieces to it that if you don't see Wildfire, well, at least you still have a control deck.
Right. You can head in the same vein, and then if you pick those up, great, and if not, you're not left out to dry.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. So I think and again, both of your cubes ended up in this vein. But what I feel like, as someone who's still comparatively on the newer side of Cube personally, as far as like, you know, my time designing and owning a cube is much shorter than many out there. What I'm kind of learning and what I feel like I haven't really seen talked about a ton is sort of almost permission to be a little bit more vague with archetypes. And what I'm getting at is basically what you two have been doing, but a sort of bigger picture look at it, which is finding a middle ground between the on-rails experience, or what can be sort of the novice approach, as you put it, John, where we're going to hold your hand and we're going to make sure there's some very distinct archetypes, and there are cards that support those archetypes, and you want to get those cards because those are your cards. Again, it all sums up, I think, to on rails. But then the sort of other end is a pitfall of, if you stray too far from that, it can feel like you're ending up more in a good stuff. And there definitely is a middle ground where you can define your archetypes either as John did from a sort of macro organization, or from the term glue, Gwen, has always stuck with me since your cube came out on MTGO, because that refers to basically cards that work in a versatile array of archetypes, or that work in a deck as a good card, but that also have some either incidental or some intentional synergy with one or more possible archetypes, right? Do you think is a good summary to what you would call a glue card?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think.
Awesome. So, and again, just coming personally, you know, I make no secret that my main cube is a creature-only cube. So every card in here is a creature. And for a long time, I felt kind of, I don't know if guilty is the word, but there were a number of sort of archetypes or themes in here. I like the word theme for my cube, that ultimately were defined by 3 to 5 cards, or by a handful of interchangeable cards, which that goes back a little bit more towards John's approach, where there's a decent one sitting in front of us. This Hanweir Militia Captain, you know, has a power and toughness based on the number of creatures you control. There's a nice smattering of those across Magic, and most of them are fairly interchangeable. They've all got their own flavor, but they all do the same thing, which is get bigger the wider you go. So that was sort of like, this is a really good example of a theme in my cube, where you can go wide and you can pick up one or more of these. But like with Gwen's cube, ultimately the deck is made up of glue. It's made up of good cards that make hopefully at least 2 creatures, or enable you in some way to generate more tokens. And then going wide might be a reward in and of itself, but then you might also have something like the Militia Captain, or Shauna is a great example, to kind of top it off. And then, like I said, there's also other flavors, like Eidolon is also an enchantment, right? It's a bestow card.
I think that most successful archetypes tend to be ones that, as we've said, allow for this sort of cross-pollination, and also potentially allow for one to operate in different theaters of Magic. So, for example, Aristocrats, we've been talking about in Gwen's cube, does this very well because it operates very neatly against at least the sort of classic Aristocrats colors, the Marduk colors, but also, you know, you can find ways of making this work elsewhere too, like in green or green-black. So that's something. You can find pieces of Aristocrats all over the place, and
Right.
You're not getting priced into a particular guild. Also, it's a strategy that can operate in a much more aggressive way or a much more controlling way, for example. So you could imagine a Rakdos deck that has some Aristocrats components that are almost there for value. Like you've got Falconwrath Aristocrat mainly just beats face. And like maybe you also put the blood artist in there as, you know, just this additional value component. But basically you're in a red black, very aggressive or like fast mid-range deck or something.
Right.
Or you could imagine that you're in a much more controlling version of Aristocrats where you do almost nothing but a sort of pillow fort all game until you set up to wrath the board and then drain them for 1,000,000,
Right.
you know? So I like that kind. I like that kind of approach a lot. Blink does similar things because all you need
Yeah.
is stuff with ETBs, and we have those in spades, right? So you
Yep.
can kind of do anything you want with Blink, you know?
Well, and that's my go-to example for my cube personally. Is you're not going to see it as much in here in the strictly Azorius cards, but Blink is actually, you know, I always lauded myself as someone who finally made Blink a tier 1 archetype in cube. All I had to do was take out all the enchantments, instant sorceries, and non-creature artifacts. It was easy. Piece of cake. But exactly what you said is the one that I always go back to. Is Blink is good in here because having ETB creatures, I would venture in cube in general, but absolutely in my cube is just part of the fun. I went out of my way to try to make a spells with legs feeling. Let's go to just white here real quick. So every color already has a nice density of good ETBs. All you have to do is sprinkle in some white Blink, or in my case, the blue is mostly there to do copies, because blue has some really good copy creatures, but it doesn't really have any good Blink creatures, and white is the other way. It's all Blink without really the copies. But white obviously has, you know, the landmark card, Resto Angel, truly one of my favorites. And it's got the Vizier as an example. It's got Charming Prince. Wisp-Weaver Angel's in here. But then you get into some different flavors, like you said, right? So one of my favorite things to Blink is a Regal Caracal. It's disgusting, and I have never not tried to do that if it comes across me in a draft.
Yeah.
And that's, again, so that goes back to sort of going wide and lifelink, and you can just kind of overwhelm your opponent with all these like these cats that you just can't deal with. And all you have to do is blink it a couple times for that to be pretty wildly out of control. But then you have some really other fun possible options, like, blinking your removal. And that could be a way to kind of get more value out of creature cards that act as removal. Alternatively, if you want to really be a jerk, you can blink your Gonti, or your Flame Tonkavu, things like that. So, as you kind of just pointed out, I'm glad you brought that up. The flavor can change based on the glue that you acquire, right? Gonti is not really an archetype defining card. It's just a solid performer, and then you can slide that into your Blink deck to get extra value, or you can slide it into your Aristocrats deck as a pillow 40. A 2/3 Death Touch is pretty hard to work around, and you can take your opponent's removal with it. Or in my cube, I guess I said he wasn't an archetype definer. He kind of is, because Grixis sort of has a stealing things theme that's emerging. A ninjutsu, fallen shinobi kind of a theme going on that Gonti plays right into.
Right. Yeah, I like that aspect you're identifying of Blink, whereby you can have so many cards that don't have to be Blink cards.
Right.
Gonti. But there's no reason to put that in it's not a card that is parasitic to the Blink archetype. It just
Right.
happens to work well there. That makes a lot of sense. I'm I think that as designers, we should be wary, or at least I'm wary of archetypes that have to be forced in order to be viable, that really require a discrete number of components and that need adequate payoffs and enablers to exist if the archetype is not to be a trap.
Right.
This is a place where hypergeometric analysis pays dividends to help ensure
Yep.
that these are available at the table. Another place that I think people go wrong sometimes in developing archetypes is that there can be cards that may look as if they go together quite well, but in fact who have aims that are at odds with each other in various ways. So I don't know if this is a great example, but Blood-Soaked Champion may look great for an Aristocrats deck because it's a creature that you can recur, so you can sack it and keep bringing it back. But if in the environment that you've built, the Aristocrats deck tends to be the Pillow Fort control deck, Blood-Soaked Champion maybe doesn't fit that well because he can't block, so he's not actually defending the Pillow Fort.
Right.
And he requires that you attack in order to bring him back, and you don't actually want to be attacking. So he may not make a ton of sense in that deck, and then hence he may not actually be that strong a component in the environment. So even when cards do work together, they may not always belong, as support for the same archetype there.
No, that's a super interesting point. It would be really easy to include this thinking, well, look, it's aristocratic because of the recursion, but it's also a 2/1 for 1. So, hey, great for that kind of pesky black aggro deck, right? But that has an effect on both of those archetypes where they have to make sure that this card plays nicely with them. As you said, this is, you're going to put this in your Pillow Forty kind of grindy Aristocrats deck, and then you're going to be really frustrated that you keep losing 2 creatures just to get this one back, right?
Yeah. Or if your environment doesn't support black aggro at all,
Right.
then this guy probably just doesn't belong because now he goes in exactly one deck. And
Yep.
as we were talking about before, we're looking for cards that are the glue, as Gwen described them earlier, that go in multiple decks.
Right. And you don't want it to be misleading. You don't want this to be taken as a signpost card or as an indication that black aggro is supported when it's not. Yep.
Right.
Fortunately, there's a lot of good aristocrat cards out there.
For the Blink example, that was one thing I was really careful with. I think Blink is a huge trap that a lot of people do with their cubes. They have this idea of a blue-white deck. They put in all these powerful ETB creatures, and they put in Cloud Shift and the one with flashback.
Ephemerate.
Not Ephemerate. The one with flashback for the blue-white one. I can't remember the name.
Oh, I know it's your
Momentary Blink?
Momentary Blink. Yep.
Yeah, Momentary Blink. But the reality is you're just trying to assemble this cute combo that gets a little bit of value. So what I tried to do with Dekker Cube is I just had cards the Blink cards are just very, very efficient. Ephemerate and Soul Herder are the only real Blink cards I had in there. And I mean, you don't need, all you need is any creature with an ETB, and you just get a ridiculous interaction, and that's the Blink deck entirely, and that's kind of the way I like to think about Blink, because you don't need to work to put good ETB creatures in your cube. You should just have them naturally and be fine on their own, and then if you add Ephemerate, all of a sudden you can add a new flavor to your mid-range decks where you can get these really high value plays. I saw someone put Ephemerate with Eternal Witness, and
nice.
I mean that is just a value engine that just never stopped.
Yep.
And it was great.
I like that. I like that example, especially just because Ewit is not going to come up. Ewit is just so solid already by itself, and is more than enough value to just be played, it's like, why would you not want to blink it if you can? And I think that goes to the root of what we're saying here, which is like, your blink archetype should not be, your goal should not be to get together a constructed deck where every card is going to just generate either immense value, or you're looking to generate lots of incremental value over time, but you're just playing cards you want to play. And then why would you not want to play them a second time and get that hit again? And I again, that sort of happened naturally for me. But I almost feel like seeing your guys' cubes and kind of thinking about it almost felt like it gave permission, you know what I mean, to really approach the archetypes that way. And part of what my struggle was I do, John, as you mentioned, I don't have a super consistent play group, so I frequently introduce new people to my cube, which is honestly a joy, right? The only thing we like better than talking about our cubes with other cube designers is finding people who've never seen them and introducing them to the joy of our cube. But in doing that, I always try to have, like a little document or some kind of little cheat card or something that I can write up where I can hand it to someone and say, here's a little guide, just so that you don't, if you see a card and maybe it could be a little bit of a trap, or it leads you to believe there's something in here that's not, you can check this little cheat sheet and say, okay, black aggro isn't in here or whatever, and not get lured down that path. But when you're trying to define an archetype, one of the things you do is try to give people a sense of the key cards, and blink being early on the list because it's Azorius. I was always like, well, anything that blinks, right? That should be self-explanatory. And then literally anything with an ETB. So like my list always ends up being half of the cube, right? Trying to explain what's good in there, like, all the evoke creatures and stuff like that.
Oh, that's sweet. Do you have, so what sort of things do you put on your cheat sheet, and what form does it take?
Oh,
do you
boy.
have an example of one? I'm curious about this.
I would love
I've heard
to.
of people doing that, but I've never done that myself.
So you've never done that one. So tell me a fun story while I dig it up, because I have to remember where I buried it in my drive. I actually, I print it, and before you judge me too much, I'm married to a school teacher, so I laminate it, because of course we have a laminator.
Very good.
And I don't think I have a physical one, but I should be able to find the PDF in just a moment, if I can remember where I stuck it. But I've tried probably, I don't know, something like three different kind of versions of it. Oh yeah, okay, so here we go. So this was the original version, printed out. One of the things that I was super concerned with at first was just making sure that people understood, look, this is a creature only cube, so if you see something that sounds like removal, take it and nurture it, cherish it. And then the second thing was, this is all motivated by my favorite type of deck, which is spells with legs, right? The reason I like Blink so much is because I like the spells with legs decks. I like decks where, you get a creature and an ETB, and then you either recur them or find some way to, abuse them, whatever that may be. Stuff like Panharmonicon, right? That's one of my favorite kind of fun cards to play. So I had this printed out. I think I had printed it on like a half sheet of paper so I could cut it in half and, kind of sprinkle them around the table, right? So there could be one in front of you. And then I need to shrink it down a bit or zoom out a bit. Let's take this out a bit.
You've got a QR code there? What's going on?
Yeah. So that the QR code goes to the list. It goes to creature feature.
Nice.
So that way, if someone's sitting there, looking at this little card, right, that I've handed them, they can scan it and go look at the actual list rather than try to type this tiny little URL in.
From the earlier PDF, that's exactly what I was thinking that I was missing. I just need a QR code because there's no way I'm going to type out that URL.
Yeah, I know, right? At least it's easier because we can customize it. So I appreciate that, Gwen. But and at one point I had a plan to put my, I have my little video primer. At some point I was going to put a QR code in for that. I just haven't done it yet because, we're locked at home. So again, this was sort of the first one, and I was like, how do I sum this up? And it's like, just get anything that makes a copy or blink something, and then any card that you like, because they all have ETBs, right? And then similarly, like this was one that I was really afraid was parasitic, was this sort of life manipulation or life gain deck, where your payoffs are things like Karlov of the Ghost Council, or even just being able to drop something like a Priest of the, what is it? Priest of the Forgotten Gods? Is that the one? That makes he makes a 5/5, but he sucks the life out of you. Priest of the Blood Rite. Just being able to keep up with the life loss here, is sort of a payoff. But again, these are like really loose payoffs, right? They're not super explicit. You don't get like super on rails. It's just a supplement to a strategy that can work kind of on its own, right? And this was the big thing that, like, I kind of learned, or that kind of changed how I thought about my archetypes, was aiming for this sort of, let's support, I think I kind of do a little bit of both here. Let's support the major theaters, right? So there's a bit of an aggro deck, or there's some aggro options, there's some mid-range options, and there's some long game control options. And let's make sure that there's enough good glue that you can just build a good deck, and then the archetype is almost the topping, right? The archetype is some number of cards that you'll pick up, 2, 3, 5, that make the deck into that archetype, but don't require that critical density of some type of card. And that the only exception in here is mill, because that's pretty impossible to support without being pretty parasitic, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing that is an issue to grapple with is, we're probably all aware, is that a lot of the micro archetypes, we have to judge the power level of micro archetypes to see where they're viable. So some may be viable at extremely high power level, of course. So there's some, I don't know, maybe Crucible shenanigans or Dark Depths and Spian Stage, or the Kiki Twin kind of stuff. But a lot of them that we're talking about are these Rube Goldberg sort of machines, right?
Yeah.
That are really fun, but require turns and turns of tinkering to get there, or at least they can.
Yep.
So in order for those archetypes to make any sense, to be viable in an environment, then you have to pay attention to the power level across the board of the environment and make sure that it's somewhat attenuated, so that the red deck wins deck or whatever doesn't just run over the other thing, or the control deck makes it just impossible to assemble the cool thing that you want to do.
Right.
So there's that concern. And then an attendant concern is when we're figuring out what pieces with these cool archetypes we're developing can be cards that work brilliantly, but that might imbalance the careful calibration that we're doing. So let's say you're trying to do some fun Drake Haven cycling and discard thing.
Right.
That's super cool. Maybe like a Night Whisperer works brilliant. Night Whisperer doesn't even work. Drake Haven probably does it. This is a bad example.
Drake Haven is, if you want to make that archetype work, you need a really low low power level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
you
you
do.
do.
It was in the version of the board game cube that like my cube started at, which is like a cube Solly Singleton put out that it's just $100 for an entire cube, and it's unplayable in that cube.
Yeah,
Just for perspective.
yeah.
Right.
Which
fair
probably
enough.
makes it a good example though,
Yeah,
right? Which is this, you know, trying to jam this
right.
into a powered cube is just not even a joke. It's just sad.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
gonna ruin someone's
So
draft.
what was it? Right. So you can imagine I think Doom Whisper actually doesn't work the way I want it to, but that's fine. Like for the sake of argument, let's say Doom Whisper causes you to discard 2 cards or whatever, and then you could make a whole bunch of Drakes.
Right.
What I'm trying to get at is that Doom Whisper is this insane Baneslayer angel that in the environment where Drakehaven is a thing that you could do and 3-0 drafts with, Doom Whisper is just like so, far above the curve, head
Right.
and shoulders above anything else anybody could be doing. Like, why are you messing around with trying
Right.
to get extra value off your Doom Whisper? You're just
Yep.
winning the game off Doom Whisper.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great. I mean, that is a good example, a good point that keeping that matrix together, right, of power level among all these archetypes is very challenging.
Yeah.
A quick answer. Samurai Afro asked about my environment. How do board stalls happen a lot, and how are they solved? And the answer is, yeah, it was a big problem when I first started with this cube. Oops, I wanted the medium view. So when I first put this together, it was designed as a 2-player cube, and I was fortunate that I had a friend that I work with who was eager to do a lot of testing with me. And the 2 major problems this cube had at the beginning were I had too much fixing, so too much focus on fixing and gold cards, and no way to solve a board stall. So what ended up happening was I did 2 things. One, I put in a bunch of stuff that in any other environment would not be a sweeper, but in this environment are. A really good example really good example is Tempest Caller. In most cubes, might be a meh card, but when your face-off is based mostly on board state, this card can really wrap a game up, or at least move you quickly in that direction. And it has definitely altered the course of a game more than once. So I made sure that every color had access to something along those lines, or something similar like Hornet Queen. That's almost like a reverse board wipe. Because in this cube where most of your removal is singleton, if you're lucky, this card creates a big problem for your opponent. And that leads me to the second thing I did, which is I made sure that every color had access to a handful of top-end cards that were really hard to deal with, so that worst case, once you got up around 6 mana, there's a good chance that someone can drop a bomb that will tip the scales enough to move the game along. And a lot of them are removal related, or they're just overwhelmingly powerful. And then Eldraine was obviously quite kind to me in the form of Adventure, which really changed the flavor of the cube a bit, and in particular added this one true, actual, honest to God hard sweeper, or very close to hard sweeper. So I was fortunate with that.
You must be over the moon for the MDFC.
I am following those rather closely. Yes, those look pretty. Are those searchable? Can you just search? Does anyone know what you can search here to pull those up? I wonder if they're like tagged or anything.
MDFC works.
That works. Beautiful. I was hoping so. Love it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of these. Adventure was a huge get for me. Before that, a little piece of trivia. Before that, this was the only card in all of Magic that was both a creature and a sorcery, or a creature and a spell. Now there's a few cards that function similarly. This is also why I'll always have mill in this cube, even though it may not be a truly viable, full on win con. Just because the meme of this card is too good to pass up for me.
The new cube, I haven't gotten a chance to look at it super well. I think maybe you all have better, but I did read the article on the mothership, which was awesome. And I got the sense that the discussion we were just having is entirely apropos here, whereby Cube wants to support all of these sweet interactions that model Commander games. So the cube is designed to be slow, right? To give you
Right.
time to set up and do all of this awesome stuff. So the cube then is definitely trying to calibrate the speed of the format to allow you to do those cool kind of things. So there's not going to be any fast aggro in here, which makes perfect sense. There's going to be mana rocks. Maybe the mana rocks are like slightly better than they might be otherwise. Sort of making stuff up as I go along because I haven't studied this as well as I should have. But
There's
Yes.
you all have remarks on.
1 drops in the cube at 540.
Sorry, what?
There's like 7. There's exactly 7 1-drops in the cube at 540,
Oh wow!
and none of them
Right.
are red. So like
Oh
that
wow!
might not be what we're used to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's cool. It's a totally different environment.
Yeah, and none of them are in red.
Wow. Yeah.
Not a 2-1 for 1 to be found.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
I think your best bet for a fast start is probably Spectral Sailor.
Well, I mean, there's the 3 mana dorks, but also
Yeah,
like
yeah.
3 mana dorks, and usually if you're playing mana dorks, you want as much as you can find.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Mhm.
But at 2, you have some more. Like you have the Bloom Tender, you have Incubation Druid, also like Lotus Cobra, and I believe there's fetches in
Oh,
here.
interesting that this is a green card.
Yeah, and there's fetches in here. So, yeah, I think the designer kind of put some hybrid cards in a specific color to make the numbers match up. I
Right.
think that's what he did.
Right. That's
So I see, or maybe like they're just very confident that they want these cards to be played in that color and not the other color.
yeah. Yeah. No, there's
And
there's
there
nothing
are-
wrong with it. I was just saying I wonder what we can learn by seeing that Fiend Artisan is specifically in green. You know, I think
Yeah, or like Garuda is in black.
Mm.
Maybe we're not supposed to play it in blue.
Right.
I do see
Right.
like a lot of 4 mana clones. Like there's Thassa, Deep Dwelling, there's Spark Double, and Sakashima Student. So I do think that that's something something to try.
Oh yeah, the Metamorph. That's a good one.
Yeah,
Or-
and there are a great many mana rocks that are in fact at 2 and then go up from there. So green, if you want to ramp, you're not locked into green at all. I
Right.
mean, as we've seen, there's 3 dorks or whatever at 1 in green. So everybody's got access to ramping into their sweet stuff so they can combo off or drop their amazing fatties or whatever. That's cool. Ooh, Deadeye Navigator, that's spicy. Oh man,
I just
remember.
spotted Heirloom Blade.
Oh, nice. That's good.
Nice, nice. Yeah, this
that's
is
cool.
actually pretty spicy right there.
You don't see that in Cube a lot.
I'm not gonna click on my cube right now, but I am gonna agree with you that you don't see that in cube a lot right now.
You don't see what? Sorry.
You don't see Deadeye Navigator in a lot of cubes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Eight mana to blink something. I did see someone. It wasn't that one. There's another fella that you can drop. The name is escaping me for the moment. I guess I can go look it up. Where you can blink something a turn, and when you have something like a counterspell creature, you know, a mystic snake down, this card can suddenly be very nice. Very nice.
Oh yeah, yeah. Nephalia Smuggler. That's
Yep,
right.
yep.
I think I've said elsewhere. I don't know if I've told you all, but when I built my first cube, it was in 2011 or so, and I was just in love with Innistrad draft. Triple
Absolutely.
Innistrad, really, but I had fun with, all of Innistrad block. And so my first cube was like 50% or something cards from Innistrad block.
Yep.
So I remember fondly doing some of that fun Soul Bond
Oh yeah.
stuff. And I had Deadeye Navigator in my very first iteration of the cube. Like that guy.
Absolutely.
I also just spotted a Heartless Summoning. That's a very spicy one as well.
Mm-hmm. That is. That's cool. That's super interesting.
Yeah, I think kind of the problem I have with this card is if you draft a deck around Heartless Summoning and you don't draw Heartless Summoning, how do you get your deck to work?
Right. Right.
I don't know if that problem that there's an answer in here, but that's what I think immediately when I see this card is.
Yep.
It will probably work if you draw it, but your deck might not work if you don't.
Yeah. A true build around, right? Where you have to build around it. But you can't take that same sort of glue payoff approach.
Maybe you just play like a green black ramp deck,
Mm,
and you just don't have.
I think you do.
Features, and you use other ramp, and you just treat this as a ramp spell.
sure.
I could see that working.
I could see
I'm
that.
with you. I think it's probably secretly a Golgari card is what makes most sense.
Right.
And that it's sort of like Pod, I think, and I'm happy we got another Pod in Tatiova or whoever. Who is it?
Figure Vanifar and
Vanifar.
We got all three.
Right.
So we do have Vanifar. Yep.
But like I know people who break Singleton for a very few cards, including Pod, maybe something like Delver or Pride Mage, in order to push these archetypes where otherwise the cards tend to be bad. Like if you don't, if you never draw your Pod, you're in trouble. Or
right. It all goes back to that density issue, right? I mean, it's all back to that. You need to have enough to see them in the draft and draw them, and that's where some of these archetypes flourish. And ironically, when we were talking earlier about, archetypes that require a density, the crazy one that comes to mind that we all just accept as worth it is ramp. And part of that's because there's a lot of crossplay, but I mean, you literally just said like these three dorks by themselves aren't going to cut it. You're fortunate that you get a few more in 2, so that just kind of tells you the speed that you can play ramp. But if it wasn't for that, you actually couldn't put a ramp deck together if it wasn't for the fact that then we also have all these signets and all these 2-mana dorks as well, and other ways. I guess also I haven't looked super closely. Yeah, it looks like there's actually not even that many fetches either, or not fetches, but land search options. Geez, that's spicy right there too. So ramp interestingly is ultimately a very density driven archetype. It's just everything in it cross plays with other themes pretty easily. I think that's why we don't hesitate to do it.
Yeah, and it's a chancy archetype, obviously, because if you're reliant on the dork version of green ramp, then you're super, super soft to not only bolting the bird, but also wraths.
Yep.
So you got to find ways of mitigating that, but then obviously we've got ways of leveraging the dorks elsewise, like opposition we were talking about earlier.
Right. Well, and like honestly, I just think any solid red-green mid-range deck just wants like, I don't know, two 1-drop dorks floating around. Just because when you get those 1-3 skip starts, and you're aiming to get into your 4 and 5 drops, it just puts so much pressure on your opponent. And that's been my experience.
I think there's something to be said for this strategy. Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yep.
I kind of like this strategy, not having played something that's doing exactly this. in the Live the Dream cube here, in limiting the number of dorks as a way of dissuading people from trying to ramp into Endra's Forerunners or Galta Primal Hunger I'm looking at here.
Yep.
Because I think that this is a trap that people sometimes fall into. They try to build these mega ramp strategies that are reliant on Llanowar elves, and like that's not going to work out
No.
in most cube environments.
No.
Right? That's not how you do it. If you're trying to get to that kind of mana, you need to be eating much, much harder than these silly dorks that make one.
Yep.
You need natural orders or sneak attacks or whatever.
Yes.
So, I tried to find ways of discouraging people from doing that. This looks like a cool strategy for dissuading people from doing that too. Like if your deck has an Avacyn's Pilgrim,
Yeah.
nobody in their right mind is putting in an Endra's Forerunners and expecting to hard cast it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, like you said, you're looking. I'm kind of skimming through trying to figure out how he does want us to cast those.
I think this format looks slow enough that
That's
you
an
are
option.
gonna cast it. Like you're gonna play artifacts or like mana rocks and cast
Right.
it.
Right. Well, and again, there's even at 3, we have some mana fixing, and we have some like I think, and there's Beanstalk Giant. I missed that one earlier. He put that in at 3, which I agree with. But so you do have a few ways to fetch up a land. It's a really interesting cube. It's really interesting.
Did you want to try doing some pack one pick ones with this cube?
Hell yeah, let's do that. So let's get on.
Maybe just view random sale packs. You can click the new pack.
The which?
Oh, actually view sample pack.
This
Bottom
one?
right?
Just do the view random.
Yeah, because then you can get new pack.
Nice. Yep.
Oh,
Oh, that makes a nice little grid. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit just to make sure people can see. Okay. Well, we're off to a very interesting start.
You got the Krill Ultimatum and Inspired Ultimatum.
Yep. Yep. Steven could not type Triome fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be a winning strategy in this cube. It's
Probably
just
not wrong.
taking, if it's slow, taking these really good
Right.
fixing lands.
Yeah,
And just playing whatever you want.
A tap 3-color land is just fine to get started.
And there's fetches in this format, and I've just been so impressed with the triomes.
Right.
Like even in my
Right.
environment, which is probably faster. I won't know for sure until I play it.
Sure.
Just having the versatility of being able to fetch a triumph is
Yeah.
just so good.
Yep. Yep. I agree with that for sure. Having the types is a big deal.
Oh, and just also Animato's Augury. I know there's like some spell cheat kind of thing. Like there's Mizzix's Mastery. So you want to like discard Cruel Ultimate and then reanimate it with Mizzix's Mastery. So maybe there's a bunch of those effects floating around, so they're not too valuable.
Interesting.
I imagine that Mizzix's Mastery is probably the effect you want to get first before you pick up one of these huge Haymaker spells.
Right. Right. Yeah, and honestly, with 2 of them in the pack, I think it's pretty safe to say one's gonna wheel. So, especially pack one, pick one. You've got plenty of time, I think. Yeah, I don't think there's anything I would take over Triome. I could see Galta, only because like you can just build towards that, and again, that's the kind of card that the cards that make Galta work really well are just a mid-range deck in green. GX, probably 3-color, honestly. In this cube, you might get into a 3-color mid-range deck, but and then when you draw Galta, you're like, great, let's wrap this up. So I could see that. Let's see what else we can dig up here. Ooh, Urza and Living Death. Whew.
I am a
Whew.
sucker for Living Death. I'll be
Yeah.
honest.
Yep. Yep.
I would definitely be tempted to take Living Death and just build around it and see what we can do.
Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna take it, you want it. You want it early, right? You want it pack one if you can.
The Signet's probably super good. Teferi is, I mean, probably just good in any blue deck, I imagine.
Just a powerhouse, right?
Kiara is also probably decent. Maybe not pick one, but probably a decent engine as well.
And I mean, Voracious Hydra is...
John, I knew there was a reason we get along. I love Voracious Hydra.
Yeah, it's a really
that
good card.
I'm a big fan as well.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
so flexible, and at every point in the game, it's good. Really
Yeah,
like
that's amazing.
I
And
do-
it's about
I do
time
have
we start
to-
getting these fight cards.
Yeah,
in green.
I do have to cop to. I always say, boy, I love Voracious Hydra. It's so versatile, and then I really struggle not to do the big mode. Like, I know there's times where you want it to fight, and I definitely am getting better at that, but I'm always like, okay, I could fight that, it'll live, that's great, it'll be a 4/5, and then I'm like, but an 8/9,
Yeah.
but an 8/9, you don't need removal if you have an 8/9, right?
I feel like I'm the opposite. Like many more times than not, I end up fighting something.
No, I think that's the right. I think that's the right approach. I think your
I mean,
your
it
default mode
depends
should
on
be
the
fighting.
context for sure,
Of course,
but
of course.
It's like this,
Yeah.
it's a fun FTK kind of thing.
Yep. I mean, like, if you
So-
have access to like 15 mana, you should just make a 30/30 or whatever it would be, Hydra, but or 28. But
Well,
no,
at
fighting
that
is
point,
usually better.
it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah,
you just take
yeah.
your 14-15 and kill the rest guy.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm definitely on Signet here.
Sure.
But Living Death, it's a real contender. But
That's tempting.
I'd take Signet. The fast mana is just too good.
Yep.
And sorry, I was on mute last time. I didn't realize.
Oh,
with
I'm
you
sorry.
On the Triome. No, it was my fault. I'm on Triome. And then what, Scoured Barrens? Maybe it was.
Yeah.
next. I'd take the
Yep.
other land, but then
Yeah,
after that,
Barons is
Dismissive
so
Pyromancer.
low quality, though.
It is, yeah.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Dismissive Pyromancer I'd probably be on after that. That's a good card.
I like that. Interesting. Also, again, just like, it's really easy to say there's not a lot of ramp in this cube, but man, when you've got things like Kiora and Palladium Mirror, that you can put together, there's some ramp in here. It's just slow, and it's big.
Yeah, Kira's
It's
great
big.
too because it's basically a mana rock, and it's an engine that if you're playing like maybe this heartless summoning style deck, you have most of your creatures trigger it. It's not a bad strategy. Perhaps something I'll definitely try.
Yeah, totally. I'm also Kiora is the definition of a glue card. I've never played Kiora and been like, that's the card that won me the game, but I think it happens a lot more than we think. She's so subtly powerful, and she's such an enabler.
I think she's like an archetype player. I wouldn't call it glue.
Okay.
It's a hybrid card, so
Right.
like I wouldn't call it multicolor, but
Right.
like if I want like a glue card, I want something that can basically go into any deck in those colors.
Sure.
So like a Mana Dork is going to be welcome in any green deck.
Right, right.
Doomblade's going to be welcome in any black deck.
Right.
Whether you're aggro or control or
Sure.
even combo appreciates the glue cards. But Kiora, it's like, well, you want to be playing big creatures. There's not a lot
That's
else
fair.
you're gonna
That's
do with
fair.
that card.
Yeah, you
For
want
me,
that
she's
4 power.
I mean, for me, she's a green card. The fact that she's hybrid is nice, but
Right.
I mean, really, she's green.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that effect. I used to run a couple of these cards like her. There was one from Kaladesh that was like Cultivators something. It was an artifact. It wasn't Cultivators Caravan though. anybody know what I'm talking about? I don't know. And there was another one from like GRN or something. That anyway, it was like when a creature enters the battle, when a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you draw a card or whatever.
Oh man, that's gonna bother me now. I think I know what you're talking about.
I don't know.
From Kaladesh, you think?
There was an artifact from Kaladesh that was maybe 3 mana. Beast Whisperer.
Beast Whisperer
yeah,
is a
Beast
fair.
Whisperer
That
is
might be one of the ones you're thinking of. Yeah.
There was an artifact from Kaladesh, and there was an
I know which one you're
enchantment.
talking about. I can't quite think of the name though. It's like you may pay green.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life Crafters. Yeah, Bestiary.
Yeah, that one.
Yes. Good call. There you go.
I almost beat Pab to that one. Yep, that was it. That was it.
Nice.
Yep. It was from
That is
Revolt.
it.
That's what it was. It was
That's
from
it.
Revolt. So it was from the plain Kaladesh. Yep.
Oh, right.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't from Kaladesh.
No.
proper.
That's
Anyway, those cards, and so I don't actually exactly know which is better, Kiora or this thing, but I didn't mind those kind of effects in earlier iterations of my cube and weaker iterations of the cube, less powerful iterations of the cube when you got time for that kind of nonsense, or not nonsense, but it gives green card advantage, which is a nice thing, and which green had struggled with historically, but more and more we've got better options than these things in a higher powered environment. That's
true. That's very agreeable. So I don't have a lot of experience with this card. Where would we be? This is the last one before I'll pull a new pack, but my understanding is Ursa's a pretty powerful build around in Constructed. Has anyone played this either of you played this in Cube and had an experience with it, or?
I think it's certainly good, but you need density of artifacts to make it worth it.
Right.
So taking it first, you could take it first and then
right.
If you see a lot of artifacts wheel, kind of tunnel into that, but I would rather try to stay open early.
Sure.
I mean, I say that right after I say that I'm going to take this Living Death, but
yeah, but I think Living Death might be a little easier to build around than this. I'm sure it depends on density, right?
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I've never tried it, to be honest, so I can't really render a strong opinion about it.
Okay.
But to me, it just looks sort of too cute.
It's quite narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to give a small shout out to From Tomorrow, which if you've got graveyard stuff that you want to do, or you want to be reanimating stuff, I kind of like that draw spell. It's not amazing, but it does let you bin something, and there's a non-zero number of games I've played where I've cast that spell for blue just to bin my Grizzlebrand or whatever, so
I mean,
that's kind of a sweet card.
If you're holding the 2, that's really not a bad use of your mana. Like, I can see that, like, blue discard your bomb is a fine card in the right environment. And especially in a slower environment like this one, the fact that you'll be able to put something into X probably a lot of the time, this is actually probably quite a good draw spell in here.
Yeah, that's true.
I like that.
It's not a first pick. I just
no. That's fair.
Fondness for the card.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Okay, so this is.
Oh, there's that Mystics' Mastery.
Quite interesting. Oh yeah, look at that.
Also double vision, I guess. You want to play those big spells.
Yep.
It kind of reminds me of the artifact. It's like Chandra's something. Taps for red and it forks spells. In the Legendary Cube, that was actually.
Or goggles, maybe.
Yeah.
Chandra's goggles or something.
Or is it just Pyromancer's goggles?
Pyromancer's goggles. Yeah.
I didn't think it was. Was it the Pyromancer's goggles that did that? Oh right. Yep.
I have many fond memories of using that and then casting Cruel Ultimatum off of it.
Oh, nice.
I mean, it's just like completely ridiculous, but that's
No, that's the kind of thing to think about when you're trying to fall asleep. Just
Yeah, Shriekmaw's a great card, but
Yep.
like there's Lightning Bolt in here. I'd take that over Shriekmaw,
Right.
and then over that I would take the fetches.
As I say, a fetch, right?
And
Yeah.
probably, since I doubt aggro is a thing, I'd lean into Wooded Foothills probably over Arid Mesa. Not that it makes much difference.
Okay. I think that's fair.
Think that's a pretty, like, generally winning strategy, but I feel like in this cube, you might want to value something more proactive towards your actual game plan.
Okay,
I'm
like
not
what?
a fan of Bolt here because, like, you're probably not going to use it to try to stay alive.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, and Pab mentioned this in the chat as well. I think Bolt is going to feel a bit flimsy in this environment. Like, there's not that many birds to bolt, as it were. And it's
true.
I just realized Marauding Raptor is also kind of along the same vein as Heartless Summoning. So that's definitely a thing.
right. So is maybe a theme that we're sensing here.
I mean, yeah, this is tough. I think I'd probably take Mizzix's Mastery and just try to see how it goes.
Right.
Or a fetch. I mean, a fetch just would be safe.
I don't think we play the Live the Dream cube to be safe, though, do we?
Yeah, and I think
mean,
the thing about
it's in the
Mizzix's
name.
Mastery is it's such a unique effect. I think there's like a 7-mana blue creature that has that text as well.
Right.
That if that's something you want to do, that's probably the only way you're going to be able to do it.
Yep. This is going to be, you're really going to have to work on it to live the dream here, because you got to get whatever you want in the bin as well, right? So you need some self-mill.
Yeah, it's like Reanimator, except this is your only copy of Reanimate.
And it's 4 mana, and it's a spell.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I'm not messing with that. You all mess with that and tell me how it goes.
No, I think
my Wooded Foothills and my Air Mesa. And then probably that Bolt.
And
I
the
see
Bolt.
what you're saying about the Bolt having less value.
Yeah.
Here, that's a fair point. Then after that, I don't know. It's like Shriek Mob.
Probably.
Yeah, Derek, for the first pack we looked at, we saw Cruel Ultimatum, the Blue White Red Ultimatum.
Eerie? Was it Eerie that we saw?
I can't remember what it's called. And Animator's Augury, which is a ridiculous 8-mana blue sorcery. So like, there's definitely hits.
Yep. Yeah, Derek just mentioned in chat he'd want to see a Cruel Ultimatum or something. Yeah, our first pack one pick one that we did was had 2 ultimatums in it, including Cruel, as well as we've seen some other whopper spells out there that are worth masterying if you can do it.
Ultimatum.
Yep. It was Inspired. You're right. Here's speaking of, I think because it's sideways, I kind of passed it over, but another doubler, another copy spell. Only once for 2 mana, but
yeah, you can't hit your Cruel Ultimatum with that one.
Right.
But you can copy your Mizzix's Mastery.
See, now you're thinking how to live the dream. Hashtag.
Fetches are good here too, because there's so much red. Like, bet something comes back.
Right, something will come around, and they're both red.
There's a lot of
that's fair.
multicolor in this cube that
That's fair.
just might just be worth it just to take fixing.
It did seem like it was on the upper side of gold.
Yeah, I saw that too. A huge number of gold cards. Let's see, what was it? Yeah, 90 gold cards compared to, between 63 and 70. Yeah. I guess you were saying, Gwen, that like maybe there are blue cards elsewhere that haven't been categorized in the blue section.
There's actually a bunch I was seeing, like you mentioned Garuda was in black and Karuga is in I went past it. Karuga's in green. I saw earlier. So there's definitely, it looks like, I wonder if maybe either based on companion or based on hybrid, these cards just got kind of their most likely. Oh, and real quick, I'm going to interject. Pab did some quick math for us, or some quick searching. Roughly 63% of creatures in this cube have toughness 3 or less, whereas in Cultic Cube 75% and Dekker Cube 77%. So
Yeah, it's pretty significant.
Slightly lower target threshold there. Anyway, I think I'm wondering, and I'm trying to kind of scan here visually, but it seems like maybe the hybrid cards just got shuffled into a color where they maybe made the most sense. I could see Kitchen Finks being white, and in this one I could probably see Luris being white.
Did your boy make this cube on Cobra, Gwen, or did you like import it from the article on Etsy or
Somebody
how,
else
how
had
did things get categorized?
somebody else had put it up on. No. This one. Yeah, this is actually the one that the designer had linked me.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
nice.
this is his, right? I mean, this is
Yeah.
presumably owned by him.
Yeah, I got mixed up with the Tinker's Cube. That one some random posted and I forked it and. But no, this one was actually organized by the designer.
So these are all representative of his choices. What meaning where they're categorized and all that. Yeah, because then momentary blink is white blue, not. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
There are a ton of
Interesting.
rainbow cards. I didn't realize how many there were. My goodness.
Yeah, there's a bunch of 3-color cards
It's
as well.
it's an archetype.
Yeah.
It's an archetype. Yeah, let's scan this 3-color real quick.
Yeah, and the 5-color section is so.
It's a lot.
Coalition Victory. There's Niv Mizzet Reborn.
I mean, if you're gonna play 5-color, I think that one has to go in. Golos and Reborn are kind of my two like first instincts.
Oh, and Gigantha, actually, that I could see that being a thing. Just 5-color Gigantha.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
If you're getting into it, you want it, right?
Yeah.
Some very powerful options overall, I would say. But you got to get there.
Yeah, that's a lot. So then the scene, how many?
There's
I
5
don't
in each color if you include the fetches, and there's the triomes.
There's the
Right.
triomes and the OG trilands.
There's Field of the Dead.
Well,
Spicy.
I don't see
lot of
many rainbow lands like City of Brass. Or am I just not looking in the right place?
Brass is
Mana
here.
Confluence, Grand Coliseum, Fabled Passage,
Oh.
Yep.
Exotic Orchard, City of Brass.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
They're-
Right.
they're here.
Sorry, I missed them.
They're
Yeah, yeah,
Missed,
for sure.
Reflecting
That's
Pool.
cool.
I think you said that one.
Yep.
So that's interesting. So you definitely want to. So what are we looking at for? So 71 total lands. It's fairly generous, I think.
Yeah, I think it's like pretty typical for the size of cube. So nothing
Okay.
exceptionally high
Okay.
or low.
Shall we do one more? I kind of want to see now that Derek's popped in,
Sure.
and I think it's illustrative. All right, I think this is actually a pretty interesting one. Oops, too far. Sorry. This is a very interesting one. Now, obviously, actually no, because even the lands aren't like top tier. I mean, Godless Shrine is, but
I think signets are top tier in this cube.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yep.
Also, like O-Ring seems pretty good.
Yeah, hard to go wrong with that.
Hmm? And Llanowar Elves, I don't know. It's hard to say because you're never going to get that density. But also, like, this is the only time you're going to see that card. So,
Yeah. I wonder if that's really pack one, pick oneable.
yeah.
Like,
that's
I
my
feel
question.
your point. Like, wouldn't you rather just have the signet and feel a little more
I think
open?
so.
Probably, yeah.
Right.
Because the elf isn't critical to the ramp plan. Interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think bizarrely, and not bizarrely, but Llanowar Elves goes way down in my pick order here. Typically, I'd be happy with that as a pack one, pick one.
Derek, there is an article put out for this cube. I don't know if we've linked that yet.
I linked it earlier, but let me just pull it up again real quick. I'll link it. But to Gwen, maybe you could give a one sentence summary, just so he has a sense of where to head.
I mean, it's called the Live the Dream Cube for exactly the reason you think it is.
I mean, that's apt. That is apt. Yeah, it's for sure.
I think the goal is, if you're not assembling some crazy over-the-top combo, you're probably doing something wrong. Big plays like Commander, yeah.
Yep, I think that's an apt summary, for sure. Like, you should see something like Temporal Trespass and be like, "Ooh, am I feeling that today?"
I don't know about that one. That seems suspect to me.
Well, for sure, but it's in here for a reason.
I think it's possible.
Interesting as well.
I think it's possible I'd take Godless Shrine.
Yep.
And kind of hope to get Vault of the Archangel back. I'm not sure if it makes it back to me, but that would be kind of sweet if it did.
Okay, that's interesting.
Would be a thing.
It's an
but if
interesting
not
take.
that, then Rakdos Signet.
Yep.
And I think for me it'd be Godless Shrine, Rakdos Signet, or the top two.
I think that's
not,
probably
not
correct.
interested in this O-ring.
I don't. I mean, I'm definitely interested in it, but I'm not high on pack one picking it, wanting it, but I'm not familiar enough with the list. So if I
Right.
felt like the removal is constrained enough, then I can totally see O-ring being the right choice here.
Yeah,
I
I feel
think-
like being able to answer random enchantments or random artifacts is going to be pretty important.
That's what I was gonna say. Is O-ring feels like it's actually gonna go up in value here because it's gonna hit so many just wacky planeswalkers, enchantments, like crazy stuff. You know, like you're gonna O-ring someone's Anointed Procession, and that's gonna be life saving. You know,
Or someone's true conviction.
yeah.
It's a great one.
Yep.
Yeah. There are a few options here: Banishing Light,
Yep.
O-ring, Cast Out, Faith's
Yep.
Faith's Fetters.
Yep.
There's some.
There's a few of those. There's a few.
What's the
few
spot
lockdowns.
removal look like? Can you scroll up to like Doom Blades
Absolutely.
and whatever?
Yeah. Heartless Act, Tragic
it's
Slip.
pretty thin.
Yeah. Mythos made it in, so, you know, again, living the dream. But I mean, when you have like 12 total 1-drops, I think it's fair to start your removal a little higher up.
Well, I saw the Blue Mythos is in here, which is one that I was actually really impressed with when I played it in the Arena Cube earlier.
Yep.
That cube, I mean, that card was a lot better than I initially thought.
Yeah, I mean, making copies is always a thing, for sure. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the creatures like an
I
idiot.
just played as a blue card and then randomly had like some rainbow fixing or something that enabled me to have its.
Yeah, I mean,
trigger.
getting a blue, a 2 blue. It's not quite a spark double, is it? It's closer to a stunt double.
I mean, the fact that the copy is permanent, it's just,
Right.
it just like does it all.
Right. And it's not that you control. That's a big thing too. Like, hey, nice bomb you got there. That's real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think this was for sure. This was a card that performed a little better than I would have thought on initial glance. So Derek said if he's going to go for something, he's going to Birthing Pod because it's a pet card. I like that. And yeah, playing it safe for sure is the Signet or the Dual Land.
And if you're gonna take Birthing Pod, like pack one, pick one. That's where to take it.
That's the moment, right?
Yeah,
That is your
I
moment
can
for
respect that.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
there's
now
also
or never.
Prime Speaker and Fiend Artisan, so there's a little bit of redundancy with that.
Yep. Yeah, you get a couple options coming around. I'm a little saddened by how much I'm not attracted to Bone Crusher right now because this is a card I always think of fondly.
I just can't imagine that card is very good if you
No.
can't get a good density of aggressive creatures. Like
No.
that's what I'd be worried
Yeah.
about.
I mean, like, the best thing it has going for it is it plays well with Kiora, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, as Derek said, it just doesn't line up. Like, these two both, I'm just like, I wanna look at those, but maybe not here. Yeah,
Another copy of. Sorry, this isn't here. I don't think
That's
it's in the cube at all. But since we were talking about these copy effects, another one to give a shout out to at lower power levels that I think is cute is Dax Duplicate. I don't know if you'll have seen that one.
Oh, yeah.
It's the 2 blue red, and it gets haste and
Dethrone.
and dethrone.
All right,
Yeah,
I've got it here.
Yeah. I don't think it's actually. Yeah, sorry. I don't think it's actually in this cube. I was just reminded.
No,
of
it's
it.
in mine.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a creature and you're thinking to yourself, this might be cute in sort of a shitty cube, there's a good chance you can. But,
Yeah,
well,
no, I think it's a cool card. I'm not saying.
no, it
it's
is a cool card.
for a shitty cube.
The real issue is, find me 8 creatures in Izzet that don't reference spells that you really want to play.
Yeah.
And that's
right.
not possible. That's just not possible. But no, this is an interesting little copy. And again, any creature on the battlefield, that can be quite good when someone just cast a Hornet Queen that you can't deal with, you know.
Yeah.
And staring it down with a Spark Double isn't going to cut it. And similarly, no, Stunt Double is a viable way to deal with that, but that is that's a relevant item. I really think, the more I think about it, and it's always the right pick anyway, but I really think, like, I almost wonder how many decks in here aren't going to want like 2 signets minimum in this cube.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's a intentionally slow format. Like,
Right.
I'm not sure you have the option not to take a signet if you see one, pack one, pick one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure. Going from 2 mana to 4 mana.
Yeah.
Oof, that's
Yeah.
a big swing.
Yeah, it is. And in this format, it's just going to be such a thing. Like, well, let's take advantage of all that hard work that people other than me have put in. On this site. I mean, even just the number of 8+ here is illustrating.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And these ultimatums are pulling the gold curve up towards the end.
Yeah, that is interesting. The curve is sort of remarkably flat through 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
maybe that's not totally true, but
I think it is
like
true.
It doesn't.
In multicolor, it peaks at 5.
Right.
Which I actually think tells you a lot. My cube similarly has a kind of a peak around 4, and you can see it most clearly in gold.
Right.
Yep. But even in, I mean, like, even if we just look at white, a little bit more of a traditional curve, but
I have a feeling that in this format, fixing is at a premium. I mean, this is always true in cube, I think, but here more than in other cubes, it's my sense it's going to be very difficult to build mono red deck or a mono blue deck, and it may even be the case that a 2-color deck is, I mean, you may want to be 3 colors.
Yep.
Or more.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
It's the format may be slow enough, and you've got powerful enough options.
Right.
In gold, and such a huge number of gold cards.
Mm-hmm. And all the signets and the tri-lands.
Right.
Oh, and you got the OGs and OGs as well, and the cycling lands, which is interesting. Yeah, very,
I like
very
this.
interesting.
I wish they'd finish that set.
Right? Give us the ally ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, Derek observed there's a lot of engine cards, so he wants to stay open and feel out what's coming around the table archetype wise, which again leads us back to those early pick signets, and lands. Just take some fixing. And like I specifically remember in the article, he mentioned Yadaro being something that you're going to try to trick out with the cycling. So if that's one of the goals, again, we know it's going to be a nice slow format. I do wonder. My guess is no, but I do wonder if you almost could slide in if you draft carefully, with some sort of what's going to not feel like an aggro deck, but ultimately serve as this cube's aggro by getting in on something like Bone Crusher, rocking like Sin Prodder, and just playing a little bit low to the ground comparatively. Even that though, even with the 2s and 3s, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, looks hard.
Yeah, might be worth one try, but doesn't seem likely.
Oh no, yeah. It's hard. It looks like there's a number of good defensive bodies. I mean, just sort of at a glance.
Right. No, you're
There
right.
with
Yep.
Hall of Omens, and I mean, even Seagate Oracle is slow to set up its body.
Yep.
I mean, it costs 3 mana, but
Yep.
your aggro, if you're trying for that, is slow enough that is going to be
No, you're right.
blocking it.
Yep.
And
You're
like
totally.
your Urza and whatever. There's a lot of X3s and X4s, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, it would be a fun thing to try for sure.
You got to
But
give it.
it's tough.
You got to give it the college try once,
Yeah.
right? Where,
Maybe with
Derek? Where
Sorry, go
did
ahead.
you get the name Rob for Sin Prodder? Derek wants to know if we ever call Sin Prodder Rob, and I'm just curious where he
I've
got
never
that
heard the
from.
name before.
Rob equals Red Bob.
Oh, that's cute.
Oh
I
my
like
God.
that.
Okay, no, I will. I like that. That's cute.
Hey,
That's
so
pretty funny.
I think I gotta go.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for having me, though.
No, thank you
it was
so
a great
much.
discussion.
It's always a pleasure, Gwen, and please stay well in this very exciting time in our lives. But yeah, we will see you around.
Yep. All right. See you around.
Take care.
Awesome. Good chatting with you, Gwen. Have a good one.
You too. See you.
Oh, that's cool.
No, this is a very interesting cube, and I think it's definitely gonna. I think this is definitely gonna be a good streaming cube, because you're just gonna. Someone's gonna do something ridiculous almost every game. It might be you,
Yeah.
it might be your opponent, but it's gonna happen, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it does seem super interesting. I wonder how fast it goes. I mean, obviously it's designed to be slow, so I wonder what that translates to in terms of actual game speed, you know?
Oh yeah, no, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to click fast, I'm sure.
Yeah.
To
At
get
least you're
through.
doing all your shuffling and stuff
Yeah.
online, you know,
Yeah.
as opposed to in paper where
Yep.
there's still more drag on the format when
Yep.
you've got slower environments. That's cool.
Very much.
That's really neat. Oh, JJ, maybe I should head out too.
Yeah, no, I
You-
think this is a good time to
Mhm.
wrap it up. So I originally thought I've gotten some conflicting information, but looking at Reddit, I haven't really been able to find any good accurate information other than I read somewhere that the cube actually goes up tomorrow on MTGO, I originally was going to try to squeeze a draft in tonight, but I'm pretty confident it's not up yet. I thought Gwen had said it was up today, but I think not. Because like I logged in yesterday to see if I could just do one quick, draft off the air, just to do that, right? Yeah, Thrill Rider saying it's up tomorrow after downtime. So awesome. So no, I think this is a wonderful place to wrap it up. John, thank you so much as well for joining me. It's been long enough that I had forgotten just how much fun it is chatting with you two, but it really is. And thank you everyone who stopped by. I will be back on Saturday with another guest. I'm going to be featuring someone else's cube once again. And then somewhere in here, I'm going to jump on and draft this cube on stream at least once. Hopefully, maybe squeeze in 2 or 3 drafts, depending on how it goes.
That sounds super sweet. And Thrill Rider,
Yeah, I think, if I remember correctly, Thrill Rider, you were a significant contributor on the cube. Is that correct? Just lurking here, watching what we say about the cube. I get it. I would do that too.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Is there, before I wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to correct us on or add that we should have mentioned, or anything like that we can throw, or if you got some links or anything you want to throw out, please drop those in chat. Mikasa Sukasa, as the saying goes. Hopefully typing a long paragraph complimenting our deep and correct analysis of the cube. Maybe not. Well, I'll let him work on that for a moment. But John, again, always a pleasure. Thank you guys. We nailed the points you're trying to show. I appreciate that so much. I may not know cubes super well, but I know people who do. So getting them on is my goal for this stream as often as possible. So anyway, Saturday. Well, and John, you recently interviewed Thomas from the Cube Invitational, and so we're gonna draft his 1-drop cube on here.
Sweet.
I'm so pumped about it. It's a very different time zone, so we had to negotiate strenuously, but
right.
We were both very excited to figure out a time where we could do that. I'm crazy pumped. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So a lot of good stuff to draft this week. I gotta soak it up while I can. You are hoping traditional and experienced cubers will think outside the box, or cube outside the box, as some might say. That's very cool. I'm very down for that environment. I'm pretty excited to try that out. So yeah, just thank you for anyone who's following, and if you aren't, please make sure you do, because that way you'll know when I'm going to jump on here and draft this on stream. But otherwise, like I said, I'll be back. At the latest, I will be back Saturday with a very cool 1-drop only cube, which I'm very excited to get my butt kicked on. So again, thank you everyone who tuned in and contributed, and thanks one more time to John.
All right, thank you, JJ. Thank you for having me. This has been just a blast.
My
Great
pleasure.
to see you all. Thanks for hanging out.
All right, we'll catch you all Saturday.